So you're probably wondering why in the last talk of the day the nature guy comes up with the suit and the tie on. And I must say that life is filled with ironies, and I am the living example of putting nature into the mainstream. So thank you very much. That would have been a lightning talk. So you might have heard of the Nature Conservancy. We are a global nature conservation organization. We've been around for 60 plus years, and we've preserved millions of acres of land and waters. We have initiated the land trust movement in the US, and yet we still feel like we're not done with our mission. We have a big research wing, a science research wing in conservation biology and ecosystem-based management. And if you've seen the last couple of issues ago in the New Yorker, our CEO and our lead scientists were debating how nature fits into the norm for the disciplines that I'll talk about, which is climate resilience. And so you might know us as buying land, but we do a lot of science, a lot of planning, and we also work very locally. This is a picture of one of our reef resilience projects where we're trying to find signs of coral bleaching, trying to discover what it means to be a resilient coral reef and abate the threats where we see them. I have three messages, geodesign principles that I'll go through as the talk continues. Tighten the message, increase the exposure, and advance the app. So coastal resilience is a program that at its heart, at its core, is an online web mapping decision support system. But it's backed by an approach. The approach is in the white bubbles in the middle, going from left to right. Assess risk and vulnerability, identify adaptation and restoration solutions, take action at individual sites, and measure the effectiveness. When we started this program in 2008 along the southern shores of Long Island in Suffolk County, the towns and villages there needed a place to put social, economic, ecological information together in one place alongside coastal hazards information, particularly storm surge and sea level rise. So we built this web map. We brought those towns and villages together and discovered with them the power of putting all this information in one place. This is the assess risk and vulnerability. There are a lot of tools now, fast forward to today, that do assess risk and vulnerability, looking at census information, NOAA's Sea Level Rise Viewer, and other tools available at the Digital Coast Partnership are examples of this. At the time, we used FEMA's HAZUS tool to calculate the amount of exposure and loss from different storm surge, but also sea level rise, permanent loss, damages. And where I'm taking us is the fact that now there are so many tools. What is our message? How are we honing the message for ourselves? And this brings me to that first principle of tightening the message. There are a ton of different spatial relationships in coastal resilience. Increasingly, ours is in identifying solutions. Where can nature, whether that be beaches and dunes, tidal marshes, oyster reefs, coral reefs, estuarine systems, mangroves, what is their role in reducing risk to coastal communities? This is our team, our technical team made up of scientists, planners, app developers, fun guys, system administrators. All of these folks are sort of our core group of technical leads in developing the applications that I'll show you. We are the Nature Conservancy, but since day one, we've worked with federal and state agencies, the Natural Capital Project, and academic institutes to build the apps that I'll show you. From 2008 to today, we are now in 13 coastal states in the US, 4 countries in Latin America, and in 3 island nations in the Caribbean. So we've built this decision support tool. Our goal is not to be everywhere, although we do have global and US national applications as well, but it's really to find this balance between customizing a tool and apps for local communities, but also making it a distributed network where you can leverage what you've built in one place and replicate it in another. So that shared network is absolutely critical. In 2013, we overhauled the whole system, because now there are tons of tools out there. How do we continue to differentiate ourselves, but more importantly, how do we accommodate scale? How do we look at sort of a modular architecture where we have our data viewer, our browser-based data viewer, and then these apps that sit on the data viewer, but that really accommodate map layers. They accommodate local community planning needs. Again, this is across social, economic, and environmental considerations. We have a flood and sea level rise app that looks at storm surge and combining that with sea level rise. Future habitat that I'll show you, which is the migration of marshes over time and their ability to keep up with sea level rise. And then we've increasingly built, or incorporated, I should say, models into the apps so that you have geoprocessing services that basically account for the model, but don't show you all the ingredients of the model. What you see is the interface that hopefully is designed well and is easy to use. And we've increasingly built apps in the floodplain. So now this is just a simulation kind of showing the data viewer and the different apps. First and foremost, coastal resilience as a decision support tool is about communication. It's about design. So each one of our apps have infographics, so you can really learn, hopefully quickly, what the app is intended to do and what it's supposed to support across risk, restoration, resilience issues, and at different scales. And so I'll be sort of showing these as I walk through other simulations of individual apps. Our bread and butter app that we developed is called Flood and Sea Level Rise. It is the combination of storm surge and sea level rise in different decadal periods. We started out working with NASA and the Goddard Institute out of New York to create IPCC emissions scenarios, and now increasingly with web mapping services and a sort of this larger distributed network of being able to consume NOAA services, for example, we increasingly have a tool that it's really about not one tool, but many tools and functions that bring tons of information together. So this simulation is in South Manhattan area, looking at the relationship between a Category 2 storm surge or hurricane and the FEMA Sandy inundation layer, so that we can look at the relationship between a modeled storm and a real storm. This helps us in our confidence mapping, it helps us in our accuracy, and it also can indicate, if this were to have happened in the decade of 2080, the differences. The next app I'll show is Future Habitat. There are a lot of models and GIS methods for basically looking at land use planning from the coastal zone up. This is the sea level affecting marsh migration model, SLAM, you might have heard of it. The ability for marshes to move upland and inland as sea level rises. In the top part of the infographic, there's a blockage, and at the bottom, there's not. There's the ability for riverine systems, floodplain systems to deposit sediments, thereby accreting the mudflat, and they can keep up with sea level rise. We've adopted this notion in Old Saybrook in Connecticut, where they're very interested to look at the relationship in their land use plans between storms and critical, or I should say vulnerable areas along their coast, and where there are open spaces that can accommodate the movement of marshes inland. So we're first seeing the different inundation scenarios, and then we open up future habitat and look at the green areas, which are places where marshes are not impeded from getting inland and keeping up with something like sea level rise. and opening up then a parcel level database to look at where open spaces can accommodate that. And we found 214 acres in their comprehensive plan in Old Saybrook, where we're able to illustrate and plan for the future. These go right into reports and maps, and is a very clear indication sort of how 2 or 3 different apps work in unison. They're binned by scale, but how those relationships accommodate this nature-based solution. Last summer, we were very fortunate enough to win the app challenge that you might have seen between Esri and the United Nations, the Global Disaster Resilience App Challenge, in the scientific and professional category. This brings me to sort of my next principle here, which is you've increased the exposure by building these tools, but you need to increase the exposure to the right audiences. It's great to have a lot of mentions and views in social media, but are those the people and are those the partnerships that you truly want to affect? And so increasing exposure and advancing the app, which is my third principle. This app is not developed for the public. Other apps we have are. This one is pretty technical. It's backed by a natural capital project Marine Invest model that runs. So this is really about targeting your audience and advancing the app with those folks in mind for usability testing. The app itself is a wave attenuation model. It's at the bay or estuarine scale. You click on a profile within a bay, and it calculates nature's role, coastal habitat's role in reducing wave height and power as it goes through that coastal habitat. The graphic clearly illustrates where you have tidal marsh, you're actually preserving the dike system, and where you do not, you have increased risk of overtopping and properties flooding. This simulation is in the Gulf of Mexico and in Mobile, Alabama specifically, where we are actively planting 100 miles of oyster reef along the shore. This is through our Restore Coastal Alabama project. And what we wanted to do is test the relationship between this coastal protection model, coastal defense app, and where we are actually actively building oyster reefs. This is in Alabama Port South. We're opening up the coastal defense app where we've planted reef. We are going to set our wind and wave characteristics. I guess first we're going to set our reef design, the height, base width, and crest width of the reef at the time of planting. We're going to move the slider so that it fits directly where we planted that reef. And then we set wind and wave characteristics that you see there and run the application. Upon planting this reef, we see a decrease in wave power at 87.2%. This does not account for oyster reef growth. These things can get very big. And so we're basically building a natural seawall in doing this, and thereby protecting the road system, as you see inland of it. The big caveat here is that this does not work everywhere. Other restoration projects we have fail. The oysters dissolve and go away. There's invasive species. And so we're really trying to test where we have opportunities to build a reef and where we can strategically locate them for maximum coastal protection. We are now on our third version of this app. This is in Southeast Florida, and we'll zoom into the Keys. And this is an application, coastal defense, looking at coral reefs and mangroves. Here we're going to zoom into the lower Keys and look directly at the naval station in Key West and set some parameters for restoring, or I should say enhancing, the hard bottom, these dark blue lines, and the mangrove on the shore that already exist, but there are this is a scenario where there's restoration efforts to enhance those systems that are already there. We're going to set our wind wave characteristics and a storm, and we're going to do the same thing. What is the role of coral reef combined with mangrove that could facilitate coastal protection? You can see the offshore reefs or fringe reefs don't really slow down the waves at all. It's still coming in very powerfully. But as it hits the nearshore reef, there is a pretty drastic drop, also with the bathymetry coming up, where waves are drastically slowed down with this enhanced reef in this scenario. But even more impressively, the mangroves that are restored have an even greater increase of 48% in slowing down the waves as it hits this naval air station. Okay, so I have just a couple more very quick stories. This is just right down the road from us in the city of Oxnard, where we are actively working with the Mugu Naval Air Base, which is looking at basically creating a strategic retreat plan for their base. They've seen a lot of sand inundate their base, a lot of flooding, and they're actively working with us and the tool to strategically retreat a major defense facility. This is an amazing opportunity for the Nature Conservancy to be doing that as part of, I would say, a pioneering example for their adaptation roadmap, which impressively has many, many references to nature-based solutions in reducing risk in this report. And we were amazed to see it and very, very happy. My last example here is in Grenada and St. Vincent in the Grenadines, where we are building a coral reef outside of the town of Grenville with the Red Cross. Why are we building this with the Red Cross? Well, they have decision support systems that look at vulnerable community assessment, so they can deploy adequate resources in a time of a disaster. They have their sort of social resilience tools, and they're very interested to work with us on our ecological resilience tools. Together, we can build reef systems that look at food security, livelihood, coastal protection, and of course, nature-based solutions. And again, my big caveat is this works well in some places, it doesn't work well in others, and we need to be very cognizant of different engineering solutions, hybrid solutions that look at both. Okay, so my final slide and my final message here is that this administration has done a lot. The U.S. administration, the Obama administration, has done a tremendous amount to put climate into the agenda, and we've worked with CEQ, Esri has as well, to look at how climate resilience tools and toolkits, nature-based solutions can be part of the conversation when we think about resilient coastal communities. So I encourage you to look at our website, coastalresilience.org, and I'm good. Thanks. Cool.